The spirit of innovation is deeply ingrained in America, and Google is helping Americans innovate in ways both big and small. From improving emergency response times to protecting against cyber attacks, local, state, and federal governments are innovating with Google AI. This is a new era of American innovation. Find out more at g.co/American innovation.
Are you ready to dairy-free your mind? This summer, melt away your dairy-free expectations with So Delicious dairy-free frozen desserts. Enjoy mind-blowing flavors like salted caramel cluster, chocolate cookies and cream, cookie dough, and more. For over 35 years, So Delicious has been cranking up the flavor with show-stopping products that are 100% dairy-free, certified vegan by Vegan Action, and are so unbelievably creamy, your taste buds will do a double take. Dairy-free your mind. Visit SoDeliciousDairyFree.com.
At Sierra, you'll always find apparel, footwear, and gear for 20 to 60% less than department and specialty store prices. But right now, it's clearance time, so you can save even more on everything you need to get active and outside. Visit your local Sierra store today.
Miami residents could be heading to the polls as planned this November.
A judge now ruling it as unconstitutional to delay the vote without the people's approval.
I'm happy that the court ruled the way they did, and I appreciate the judge's ruling.
A win for Miami mayoral candidate Emilio Gonzalez.
The idea that people can have an election yanked from them 4 months before they cast their ballot is something that I just wasn't willing to stomach, and I had to do something.
Miami commissioners voted 3-2 to pass the ordinance last month. Commissioner Damian Pardo, item sponsor, said, quote, "We are confident in the strength of our case and remain optimistic about the outcome on appeal."
It makes them look ridiculous, and unfortunately, if that's the route they want to go, fine, we'll go there, but they'll lose again.
Once again, the city of Miami getting international bad publicity for being a third world shit show. Not only did the commission 3-2 unilaterally vote to cancel or postpone an election for mayor and I believe 2 city commissioners, but they gifted themselves an extra year in office. So everybody who was elected to a 4-year term got themselves another year, a 5-year term, effectively, with all of the benefits that bestows, both economic and certainly political. Emilio Gonzalez, who had already filed to run for mayor, was suddenly found himself disenfranchised along with the rest of the voters in the city because there was no more election to run in November of 2025. And he did what everybody in Miami has to do if you can afford to do it in order to get the city government to behave constitutionally, which is to sue them. And Emilio Gonzalez, the former city manager of the city of Miami, now candidate for mayor, is joining us. Emilio, well, first of all, congratulations on this. Really, incidentally, this was supposed to be a move to shift elections from odd year to even year in order to increase turnout. Fine. The argument wasn't really against the plan so much as it was the execution and the process, which was instead of taking it to a referendum of voters, the commissioners just decided themselves, which I believe was unethical for them to gift themselves that benefit. I don't know if that was the issue that you guys had in your hearing, but beyond that, you won. The city is now appealing, which I just think is a waste of time and a waste of money and resources and a further disenfranchisement of all of you candidates who are supposed to be running for office here. Like, what is going on? What are the next steps here? And when is this going to be, one way or another, when is this going to be over? And when are we going to know if we actually have an election or if they're going to cancel it?
Listen, Billy, thank you. We're going to have an election, and this is going to be over very, very quickly. I was beside myself when I started hearing rumors that these folks wanted to cancel this election. And then it came out to be true. I know the charter. I read the charter. These people, they did something that was against the charter. It was illegal. In fact, the judge, rightfully so, told them that what they were doing was a sleight of hand, I think was her term. Their defense was that, hey, it's really not a charter change. We just passed an ordinance. It's not a big deal. And to her credit, she said, yes, it is a big deal. You violated the city charter, you violated the county home rule charter, you violated the state of Florida's constitution, and you violated numerous statutes within the state.
Is that all?
Is that all? Yes. and then on top of that, they really hang their argument, because I've never really been sued. So I was in this courtroom, and it was a Zoom courtroom. And then they based their argument on what happened in the city of North Miami. It was like, well, essentially, if they did it, we can do it. And my legal team was like, well, listen, just because they made a mistake doesn't mean we're making one. And as a matter of fact, my lawyer is a former Supreme Court justice. So the case was laid out beautifully, and we thought this was going to be it. End of discussion. What do? A nanosecond after the judge rules against them, they file an appeal. The appeals court, to their credit, because it's an election issue, is going to hear this case on Tuesday. So I will be there with my attorney on Tuesday, and once again, the city of Miami will look ridiculous. And the only option they have after that, when they lose, is to appeal to the Florida Supreme Court, if the Florida Supreme Court decides to hear it. But the reason I say this is ridiculous and ludicrous, Billy, is we're paying for this. I am paying for my city to defend itself from an accusation that they stole an election. I'm paying for them stealing an election.
This is always the way. You pay for them to disenfranchise voters with the unconstitutional redistricting. You pay for them to defend the corruption of Joe Carollo, who has lost time and again in his individual capacity. So yes, you're paying for his personal attorney's fees, for crying out loud.
I'll give you one better. And this one is for another day. But when I filed as a resident, and thank God that I have the ability and the resources to do this and to have the right attorneys. Billy, not one fellow candidate checked in to say, we agree with you. I take that back. No, I made a mistake. Michael Hepburn.
Oh, Michael Hepburn.
Michael Hepburn reached out to me. Other than that, not one said, congratulations, can we help? Attaboy, can we write a check for your legal fees? Not one. So, except the day before the trial, 24 hours almost to the hour, Commissioner Carollo decides that he's going to file an amicus brief on my behalf.
Commissioner Carollo is always on the right side of history. So, Emilio, this is a great segue, because the proverb says that success has many parents and failure is an orphan. Since you won, first I'm going to put up this mailer or this email blast that Eileen Higgins, the county commissioner, who's also, I guess, I hadn't noticed, but is running for city mayor. Boom. Subject: a victory for democracy. Eileen Higgins for mayor. Today's court decision declaring that not politicians. I'm running for mayor to build, I have to read this, an affordable and prosperous future for all residents. Because Miami deserves a government that works for you. I thought that nobody starts a sentence with because. Clearly, that's a shout out to me. But here's my question. Where the hell has she been? I don't even think she gave a quote or a comment to the press about this.
And on top of that, I think at the end of that mailer, because I got it too, I think, push here for $25 contribution or something.
She's fundraising on your court victory.
They all are. Xavier Suarez was quoted as saying when he announced that he was part of my legal team, or that he had provided strategic guidance.
Hang on, I'm gonna play a clip. So Xavier Suarez, the former Miami mayor who was removed from office in 1998 for voter fraud, his son Francis Suarez, he is the current mayor, and now on the day that Emilio Gonzalez won his court victory, Xavier Suarez files to run for mayor, and he says this.
What did you think about that proposal?
I didn't agree with it, and I helped. I actually recommended the law firm that did the litigation.
And in his press release that he put out announcing his candidacy, his filing for city mayor, he said a very similar thing. Now, this is a lawsuit, incidentally, you were suing, in addition to the city, his son, Mayor Francis Suarez, as well as the three commissioners that had voted for this scheme. He was on your legal team. He was giving you legal advice to sue his son. What is he talking about?
Yeah, listen, we ended up having to remove all the individuals from the lawsuit, because had we done that, then it would have been like 5 separate trials, if we're suing all of these people. But we just wanted to make sure we covered our bases legally. I'm telling you, I have a first-rate legal team. They didn't miss a beat. They did what they were supposed to do. They argued the law, and they argued the law, I'm telling you, brilliantly. Miami's city attorney's office, they argued, well, North Miami. In fact, their attorney, if I remember, he even said, on the surface, it might appear that there's a conflict between what we did and the city charter. Of course there was a conflict. Everybody could see the conflict, and I'm still paying for you to see that conflict and still lose.
So immediately, as you said, you win. I, amongst other local journalists and reporters, reported about your victory. And within, not hours, I get an email from Kenya Fallett, the spokesperson now for the city of Miami, working for the city manager. Its subject is statement from the legal department. Good afternoon, Billy. Please see below statement from the office of the city attorney and attached notice of appeal. The quote is from the city attorney: while we respectfully disagree with the trial court's decision, we are confident in the strength of our case and remain optimistic about the outcome on appeal. To which I reply about less than 20 minutes later: thanks, Kenya. Quick question. Is the office of the city attorney more or less confident than they were about the strength of Joe Carollo's success on appeal? And I say that because, speaking of, shit your tax dollars are paying for, this has been the line from Joe since he lost that $63.5 million corruption judgment in his individual capacity. And the city taxpayers have been paying his personal attorney's fees for as much as $15 to $20 million. This is what Joe Carollo and the city attorney have been telling us for 2 years.
Joe Carollo was ordered to pay more than $63 million for abusing his power at City Hall.
This is going to be overturned. We will prevail in an appellate case. Of course I'm excited for my appeal because I will win that appeal hands down. They're petrified of the appeal because they know there's no way they're going to win that appeal. No way whatsoever. This is going to end up in two ways. Either they throw the whole case out, or they say that there's going to be a retrial. The case against me is going to be thrown out against everybody in the city that they've sued. Will be thrown out later this year in appeal.
We're working to get some reaction from Miami Commissioner Joe Carollo. A federal court denied his appeal to overturn a $63.5 million verdict against him.
What do you think, Emilio? They're going to be as successful with the appeal against you?
Listen, I was interviewed outside my home, and I told these, listen, this is ridiculous. It really, and what's going to happen is we're going to win. It's going to be ugly. And the city is then going to sit back and say, well, if you notice the comment you got from the city, it wasn't exactly like overwhelmingly confident. No, we are optimistic that we might. No. Guys, the only way you're going to overturn the court is if you find out that this lady, did something illegal or improper. It's ironclad. You violated the city charter. You violated the county charter. By the way, I forgot to tell you, during the trial, there was actually a county attorney on, and a county attorney submitted a brief saying, hey, we want you to interpret the county charter the same way the plaintiff is interpreting the county charter.
No.
That, yes, the city violated the county charter.
Oh.
And the Florida Constitution. I mean, what else do you need to just stop and give the voters back an election on November the 4th? They are trying so hard for people not to vote. And then, Billy, then they sit there and tell you, well, we are going to have an election. But you know what? You're not allowed to vote for anybody. You have to vote on. You have to vote on these two referenda items. One of which has to do with, term limits, which really aren't term limits because we had a carve out for a couple of. I mean, come on. Listen, this is not rocket science, and I will tell you, Billy. I will tell you. We in Miami are used to a lot. We put up with a lot. One of the things that I found, and I find it a very humbling experience. I've never run for anything. Okay. I go to Publix. I go pump gas. Perfect strangers knock on my door. Stop me when I walk my bulldog. Thank you. Thank you. Finally, somebody is doing what needs to be done. Listen, this is tame compared to the stuff they kick them all out, put them in jail, on and on. I mean, it really is a humbling experience. But what I think what we're witnessing is an upcoming tidal wave of discontent. People are pissed. They are pissed. And in this community, people tolerate a lot, but don't tolerate taking my right to vote away.
But also every day that this goes on, the uncertainty of it, the appeal is disenfranchisement. It's disenfranchisement of the candidates. It's disenfranchisement of the voters. It's tougher to campaign. It's tougher to fundraise. I mean, to be fair, candidates couldn't even file to run because for a while, there was no election to run in.
Well, think of how ecumenical this has become, that a group called Veterans for America First and the NAACP have both chimed in to support my lawsuit. Okay, this is beyond.
It's a big tent. It's a big tent on this one.
This is a circus tent. No pun intended.
Well, in Miami, it certainly is.
But this is no longer about Republican or Democrat, about left or right. This is about wrong or right. And people understand that. You don't yank an election. If you were seriously thinking about doing this, what happened last November when we actually went to the ballot, to the vote? Why wasn't it a good idea then? Why is it a good idea now? And why does it have to be now? When we do the census every 10 years, you take the census and then prospectively you will inform states you've gained 3 congressional seats. Prospectively, so that the next election they plan for 3 additional congressional seats. Here, they want to go backwards. Listen, if you want to have elections on even years, fine. Let the voters decide.
Sure.
If they decide, let's do it prospectively. Effective, pick a date, 2032. Everybody stands for election. Period. Right. End of discussion. And they would have a great deal of people supporting them.
And what would happen, of course, is that you'd have voters going into the polling place with the knowledge that you're voting for somebody for a 5-year term, for example, as opposed to now the people who got elected for 4-year terms suddenly gave themselves 5-year terms. There was disenfranchisement on top of disenfranchisement in this scheme.
I publicly have said, look, if you guys want to do this, when I win in November, I'll serve a 3-year term. No buy-in. Mute, crickets, nothing. I'll do a 3-year term. But there's another issue that people forget and we need to think about. And that is, if you have elections in even number of years, you will eventually have an election in a presidential campaign. So the day that Emilio Gonzalez, average citizen, decides he wants to run for city commission, I will be on the same ballot as a president, a governor, a senator, a congressman, a mayor. Bottom line, by the time my name appears on a ballot, it'll be on page 14. Okay?
Right.
Secondly, when I go fundraise, everybody's going to laugh at you. Hey, look, I already gave to the presidential candidate, a governor. So what you end up doing is you may, and I want to see the numbers, you may increase turnout, but you're going to decrease the number of candidates, because at that point, the only people that can afford to run are these legacy guys that have existing PACs and they're bored because, their wife has got too many things for them to do.
Of course.
So they're going to run for office again and they got $200,000 left over. So, when they did it in even number of years, the logic back then was if you do it in the off years, then people can concentrate on municipal issues and not get lost on all these bigger.
And listen, we've had this debate on the show before, whether or not the even year election increases franchisement or not, whether higher voter turnout of lower information voters is actually beneficial for democracy, whether candidates can compete because of we don't have a deep bench in terms of campaign talent in this town. So there's going to be greater competition against congressional races and presidential campaigns to hire people. Advertising and printing and mailers are going to be more expensive and more plentiful in mailboxes. You will not be able to penetrate. So this whole idea that Commissioner Pardo presented, that this is going to somehow improve the kind of quality of the candidates and the competitiveness of outsiders is, to me, total bullshit, because the only people who can compete are the political dynastic crime families that have been holding us hostage for generations.
An interesting anecdote during the trial. It was a Zoom trial, but a lot of people were able to watch, and there was a lady who kept raising her hand.
Can't do that during a trial.
but the judge, madam, what can I do for you? I'd like to speak.
Oh.
So check this out.
They swear her in? What happened?
No, the lady spoke.
Get out.
And the lady was a resident of North Miami, and she spoke to say that this business about voter turn is BS, that the people in North Miami are incredibly pissed at the fact that they had to extend their office holders. And she said, again, this is anecdotal, that in this election, whenever the local people appeared, they just skipped them. So the voters voted for other people, and they left that blank because they were not going to legitimize people that were imposed upon them against their wishes.
Or they had no idea who the hell they were. I mean,
listen, and to my point earlier, okay, let's say you can improve turnout. Right now, turnout is miserable, okay? But you know what? Show me the stats. I mean, there's got to be some empirical data other than the city of North Miami.
But bottom line, we should be able to have this conversation and debate when we go to a referendum to vote on whether or not to change the elections to even year, which did not have, that's why I said there's disenfranchisement on top of disenfranchisement here.
To your point, though, they always talk about the low turnout in Miami, and we have an abysmally low turnout. Why is that? It isn't because people don't care. It's that we have a really poor candidate class of people. If I have to choose between bad and worse, I'm staying home. I'm not interested in giving anybody my vote. And historically, that's what we've had. And unfortunately, our political classes, by the way, I've changed that. We've gone from politicians to political class. Now we have a political caste, right? Our political caste, they like that. They like to keep turnout low. They want to be able to manipulate the absentee ballots and people voting at the senior centers and all that good stuff. And they're counting on being able to win an election where their turnout is maybe 12%. We just had an election in District 4 where something like 11% of the people showed up to vote. Okay, 2,800 people now allow Ralph Rosado to vote on the future of our city.
The best commissioner money could buy, Emilio. I've never had you on the show before. So while I have the opportunity, I have to ask this because we now are in a place where Miguel Gabella, the Commissioner Gabella, who's been on this show before, is the only elected official in City Hall who has not been adjudicated to have violated the Constitution, either the U.S. or state Constitution. Everybody else, from the mayor and all of the other commissioners, the 3 commissioners who voted for this scheme, Joe Carollo, to his credit, did vote against it. However, he's been adjudicated to have violated the First Amendment rights, of course, of the property owners in Little Havana, a case in which you testified in.
Away from the commissioner entering court to face the first witness.
For 11 a.m.
That's Miami's former city manager. The jury learned about his military and national security past, trusted county and then city administrator, who, as boss of Miami's operations and staff, got along well with Commissioner Joe Carollo until the ball and chain controversy, the signs that the commissioner was targeting, his words, that and its owners' other business properties along Calle Ocho, a midnight tour of grievances, requests for code and police inspections. City staffers, Gonzalez told the jury, were afraid not to comply with a powerful commissioner.
It's my understanding that this issue was the reason you resigned as the city manager at the city ultimately, and may very well play into the reason why you're running now for mayor. I'll give you the last word.
Listen, I resigned more than anything else because my wife had gotten sick and I had priorities, and my priorities were not going to a circus every other week at the city of Miami. It isn't what I said at a trial. It's what everybody else said. Okay. When my police chief and my deputy city managers and my department heads all come to the same conclusion that a lawful business is being targeted, it's wrong. That's wrong. And we should not allow ourselves to play that game. It is wrong. The trial took us to where it did. It was a jury trial. It was appealed. The man had his day in court, and that should be the end of this. But the moral of the story is citizens can fight back. Okay, citizens don't have to sit back and take it. Citizens don't have to have their election stolen from them. Citizens have a say. And my expectation is that this November the 4th, we will have an election. And we will have, I'm convinced, a tidal wave of people coming out to start all over again.
Emilio Gonzalez, EmilioForMiami.com. Thanks for being here. I hope you'll be back before the election that you insist is going to happen. You're promising us an election now.
It will happen. It will happen. Much against the wishes of the power brokers at City Hall, we will have an election this November.
What does Zyn give you? Not just smoke-free nicotine satisfaction, but real freedom. Freedom to do what you love and choose your rewards. With Zyn Rewards, you can redeem points for premium tech, outdoor gear, and gift cards to your favorite retailers. Find your Zyn and keep finding rewards that fit your lifestyle at zyn.com/rewards. Warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. Sports are all about teamwork, and so is insurance. Whether you need an in-person or digital assist, State Farm is there to help you choose the right coverage for your home, car, and more. Get a game plan that helps fit your life and talk to State Farm today. State Farm with the assist. Coverage options are selected by the customer. Availability and eligibility vary by state.
The Jack Welch Management Institute at Strayer University helps you go from, I know the way, to I've arrived with our top 10 ranked online MBA. Gain skills you can learn today and apply tomorrow. Get ready to go from make it happen to made it happen and keep striving. Visit strayer.edu/Jack Welch MBA to learn more. Strayer University is certified to operate in Virginia by Chev and has many campuses, including at 2121 15th Street North in Arlington, Virginia.
My name is Happy Gilmore. I haven't swung a club in years.
You know what you gotta do. Grip it and rip it.
Or... Oh, now that is some Happy Gilmore.
Everyone is talking about the comeback kid, Happy Gilmore.
Happy knee.
Yeah, baby.
Happy Gilmore 2, only on Netflix July 25th. Rated PG-13, may be inappropriate for children under 13.
So there are certain Miami must-read books, as I call them, because people will call me, particularly through the pandemic, as, you know, the Roscon Man Bros started moving to town from every coast, up, down, left, right, sideways. And like, well, what do I read? Like, what kind of helps me prepare for Miami, to understand Miami a little bit better? It's the history and what I'm about to get myself into. I mean, first advice is don't move here. But if you have to move here, one of the books always on my forever Miami must-read list is The Swamp by Michael Grunwald. It's one of the best books about politics and the environment and Florida and things that really matter, but also in the most funny, compelling, readable way. Because, like, a lot of the issues that Michael Grunwald covers, it's pretty heavy shit. And you're going to be like, I don't want to read about that. It's like, it sounds like homework. It sounds stressful. But you start reading it and you're like, why is this funny? Why is this so much fun? He's great to read and he's great to talk to. And he's joining us now on Because Miami. Michael's new book, this is why he's here, I should mention. We Are Eating the Earth. The race to fix our food system and save our climate. See, existential shit. We're literally looking, for those of you listening and not watching, we're literally looking at the cover of the book, which is orange with what is basically a plate with the earth painted onto it that is cracked in like half a dozen pieces. So, as I was saying, it's really not an episode of Because Miami unless we get into an existential conversation. Because Miami is forever an existential kind of a place. Because we're one of the youngest cities, but we're also going to be the first to go, aren't we, Michael?
I appreciate your kind words and your optimistic take. It's great, Billy. I'm definitely trying to make the unpleasant and existential and boring more palatable. Right, since 20 years of this now.
Well, it sounds like a 50s or 60s like Roger Corman horror movie. We are eating the earth. There should be like a theremin on the soundtrack.
Soylent Green is people.
Yeah. So here's the problem with us humans. We got to fill our pie holes with something, right, in order to survive. And in order to do that, we got to make food, right, which I guess means we got to grow food, which means we need earth to do that. And what you're saying is that we are somehow, by just virtue of needing to stay alive, we are destroying our soul vessel here for humanity?
Yeah, that's basically right? This is like a pretty nice planet, right? It's got
it'll do.
It's got pizza, it's got reliable Wi-Fi, breathable air.
Yeah.
Right?
Speak for yourself. I live in Miami. We have popsicle sticks and Elmer's glue is this infrastructure.
Well, it used to be a natural planet. It used to have trees and grasslands and wetlands, stuff like the Everglades, as you mentioned. And it has become an agricultural planet. 2 of every 5 acres of land on this earth are now farms or pastures. And, by contrast, right, we talk about, the sprawl is out of control. Well, 1 of every 100 acres of the earth are cities and suburbs. So really, we are losing a soccer field worth of tropical forest every 6 seconds, and we're losing it to agriculture. So, I'd written about the sugar industry a little bit in the swamp, but I really didn't know squat about farms. And it is not only a third of our climate problem, but it is, uses 70% of our fresh water. It's the main cause of water pollution. It is the main cause of biodiversity loss. If you care about the environment, you should probably care about agriculture, but nobody really does.
Well, let's talk about that, because we hear a lot about, greenhouse gas emissions. We hear a lot about sea level rise. We hear a lot about, there's a lot of things that we hear about with respect to climate change and the environment, but we rarely hear about this. Like, I'm embarrassed to admit it, but this is kind of the first time that I'm aware that the idea of our growing food is somehow a bad thing for the planet. Are we misguided? Are our priorities out of whack with respect to this conversation?
Well, look, I can't get too preachy about it because, 6 years ago when I started working on this, I knew nothing about it. I wrote a fair amount about energy and climate. I just didn't know about a third of the problem. And, I think part of it, I like to say that this kind of carbohydrate problem is more interesting than the hydrocarbon problem, because at least with energy, we kind of know what to do, right? You want to electrify the global economy and run it on clean electricity. And we're even sort of starting to do it, despite what the yahoos in Washington are doing right now. But food, we didn't even know what we need to know. And the problem is getting worse in a hurry. So it did seem like, a kind of interesting thing to dig into. And what you really, what you find is that this is the problem that we're not addressing. Well,
you said
I write about a lot of solutions, but so far none of them have much traction.
Well, you said 40% of the earth is dedicated to this, and that's the thing too, is there's more of us. We need more fuel for us. There's a stat that I heard you say the other day that we're going to have to make more food. You know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
This is a shocking fact.
Yeah. We're going to have to manufacture more food in the next 30 years than we've made in the last 12,000 since the invention of agriculture. And right now we are on track to deforest another dozen California's worth of land by 2050. And that's really bad. Not only for the, not for just for the bugs and bunnies and other critters that live in the forest, but remember, forests store a ton of carbon, and they also absorb the carbon that we pump into the atmosphere with our fossil fuels. So I like to say that, trying to decarbonize the planet while continuing to vaporize all these trees, it's like trying to clean your house while smashing your vacuum cleaner to bits in the living room. You make a huge mess, but you're also crippling your ability to clean up the mess. And that's essentially what the book is about. We're eating the earth, and we got to start eating less of it.
And you're kind of one of these people who starts to learn, as you said, and research and understand. And then you start to change your behavior as a result of what you're like, oh shit, maybe I need to be doing something a little bit different here. And you have a new diet, right? As a result of this book? Or...
Well, look, if I was going to be, look, I feel like diets, it's sort of like religion, right? You just find the level of hypocrisy that you're comfortable with. And if I was going to be the really good food and climate writer, I would go vegan, because that is the best diet for the climate. But it turns out, like, I really love meat. And our ancestors started eating it 2 million years ago, and we actually evolved to, we're sort of hardwired to enjoy it. So what I did was I cut out beef and lamb, because it turns out that cutting out beef and lamb is about as good as going vegetarian, because vegetarians tend to eat more dairy, and really cattle are the problem. They are like, beef is 10 times worse than for the planet and for the climate than chicken or pork. And it's partly because of the burps and farts that everybody talks about. And those are a problem. There's a lot of methane that, from flatulent cows. But the real
problem is... A lot of methane in the studio, too.
Yeah, I'm sure. I've been around you, Billy. But I think that, the real problem is that cattle just use an extraordinary amount of land. They are really inefficient converters of their food into our food. And so while, dairy is really bad, it's probably worse than chicken and pork, but at least because it's cattle, but they do make milk a few times a day, but they only make beef once in their lifetime. So beef just turns out to be, beef is the baddie. And I know it's like, I miss steak, I miss burgers, but I just figured if I'm going to be this guy writing this book, I better do something.
So what do you? So you eat fish?
I eat everything else.
Okay, chicken.
I eat everything else.
All right, pork.
I always say, like, people ask me, like, what are the things you should do if you want to reduce the impact of your diet on the planet? And, like, I could give you a list of 50 things that would help, but beef is so much worse than all the other things. I just say, eat less beef. Number 2 is waste less food, because, we waste about a quarter of our food. And that means we waste a quarter of the farmland and the fertilizer and the water that goes to grow that food. We literally use a landmass the size of China every year to grow garbage. So that's dumb. But then it's like, if I had to do number 3, it would be eat even less beef, because that's just that much, it's an outsized part of the problem.
Well, there's always a Florida connection, and the Florida of today is the America of tomorrow. We are the laboratory for democracy, the beta testing grounds of sort of every bad idea that every lobbyist ever had. The spear. And then we export that Florida f***ery to the rest of the poor country. And last year, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed a bill that banned the manufacture, sale, or distribution of cultivated, also known as lab-grown or cell-based meat in Florida. Law went into effect last summer. DeSantis stated that the ban aims to protect Florida's agricultural industry and address what he termed the, quote, global elites plan, end quote. So what happened there, and does that help us eat the earth less?
I mean, it's so absurd. I mean, first of all, right, like, it's the free state of Florida and they're telling us what meat we can eat, right? I mean, this is just, and obviously, this is partly because, right, he calls it lab-grown meat. It's actually, I mean, the industry calls it cultivated meat, which makes sense because it's going to be grown in breweries, not labs. And I've tried it, and it tastes like meat because it is meat. It's grown from animal cells. I've had, cultivated sushi. I've had cultivated burgers. I've had cultivated chicken. It's not available for sale yet because they haven't gotten it cheap enough, and they haven't got, some of the places, they're just starting to get their FDA approval. But it can reduce, aside from saving billions of animals, it can reduce land use by 90%, reduce emissions by 90%. It doesn't require antibiotics, doesn't require hormones. It's a really, it's exciting technology, but because, just like electric vehicles were seen as sort of Obama-mobiles, now these kind of like fake meat is seen as Biden burgers. And it's just like trying to start a culture war. And you gotta, like you say, Florida comes first, but now 6 other red states have banned cultivated meat.
This is a very legitimate sort of potential solution to what it is that you write about, which is, of course, saving our one and only planet here. And we have banned it. And so have 6 other states.
It really is. I mean, the earth is becoming an animal farm, right? I mean, I talked about how, 2 of every 5 acres of of the planet are now agricultural. Well, 2 of every 3 acres of agricultural land are pasture. And if you include all the crops that we feed to animals, really like 3/4 of our agricultural land are basically to provide stuff for animals to eat before we eat them. So, again, we're eating 350 million tons of meat every year. And it would be really exciting to be able to keep doing that without having such a dramatic impact on the planet. But that's woke. That's, and of course there are some cattlemen who showed up to, Florida hearings wearing their cowboy hats. And that's Ron DeSantis. He listens to the growers. He doesn't really listen to the eaters.
Yeah, but nobody's going to stop them from doing what they're doing. This is to compensate for, like you said, that many more mouths that we have to feed and that much more. They can never produce enough cattle at the rate at which you're talking about that we're going to need, right?
It's really true. You really would need a planet B, right? We saw The Martians, right? Like that place. I know that there's certain people who would like us to start a new civilization up there, but I saw Matt Damon trying to grow potatoes on that land, and it seemed pretty hard. We have a much better place to grow food. We're just making a hash of it.
So before we go, I have to ask you, because there's stories that I see that make me think of you. If there's a story about Cape Coral, because you've done a lot of writing about Cape Coral, which has been in the news in the past month.
Oh yeah, it was really fun when I went there for my daughter's soccer tournament. I was like, they didn't really hold like a parade to welcome me.
Yeah. So the headline, Cape Coral has the worst housing market in America. You can set your watch to this headline, right? Like this is a headline, and it's a canary in the coal mine for me for a recession or a housing bust cycle, because you see Cape Coral and you're like, oh shit, that's where it happens first. Is that what we're looking at here? Is it the red flag?
Well, as you know, I did write a story about Cape Coral called the boomtown that shouldn't exist. And it is it's Florida's Florida is what I like to call it. I mean, the insanity of that place, the way they, it's the most it's a peninsula popping off the peninsula. It's the most unnatural corner of the unnatural part of the United States. And there are all sorts of reasons to believe that place is just like cruising for a bruising. But that said, like in the past, like this is probably a buy signal, right? Like people probably shouldn't be living there. They're right in harm's way. It's like, it's our best hurricane alley. They are living in the swamp. But the moral of Cape Coral is that it's about lies that came true, right? It was swampland that everybody, that people passed off as like buildable land when it really wasn't, but ultimately it was. And I wouldn't buy a place in Cape Coral, but probably it'll be worth twice as much in a few years.
The only guy in Miami who's not a realtor, Michael Grunwald. Before we go, last question. Speaking of the swamp, the Everglades, in your book, it really is sort of like the bipartisan island where people could kind of come together, and no matter how divided and how much partisanship there was, we could come together about protecting, if not saving, the Everglades. And now the Gator Gulag, you got Alligator Alcatraz contributing concrete and light pollution and sound pollution, not to mention the human rights violations and all the human beings that are becoming skeeter food out there. You've got the Miami-Dade County Commission proposing to move the incinerator that burned down in Doral next to the...
That'll show them.
Listen, what could possibly go wrong building an incinerator next to a concentration camp in the Everglades? But incidentally, the Democrats don't seem to be doing shit. We have a Democratic mayor of the county. She's like just absolutely a spineless quisling. Just her silence is pure complicity in this. I guess what I'm saying is now we're all just kumbaya on shitting all over the Everglades. Is that what's happened the last quarter of a century?
It's funny, I end my new book, I end We Are Eating the Earth in the Everglades, and because in a way, the idea of, this is like just as agriculture is intruded into the Everglades, but also some of the projects that are actually trying to restore the Everglades, they're restoring peatlands. And in a way, that's like the best climate project you could have, right? That's like the best bang for your climate buck. But no, I mean, as you know, the beginning of the swamp, I started it like during, the Supreme Court case, Bush v. Gore. While that was being argued at the Supreme Court, Jeb Bush and Bill Clinton were celebrating the Everglades at the White House. And they were celebrating Everglades restoration because, it's not like every politician really cared about the Everglades, but you at least had to pretend to care. And that ship seems to have sailed, right? I mean, I remember Mayor Daniela, when she was, when the swamp came out, she was kind of I think she was like a volunteer for the Audubon Society, and she used to come to my book talks. And then she would just come. I remember talking to her a little bit. The Everglades used to be this real unifying, inspiring thing that we all had in common, and that really did seem to cross the political divide. But I think today nothing crosses the political divide, and the swamp is just. It's not where some people are using it like, hey, because we don't like the people who are using the Everglades as a concentration camp. So we're going to, so that's a talking point. But you don't see anybody who really cares about the Everglades in public life right now.
Yeah, not even it seems the people who used to care about the Everglades either. Some of the organizations used to kind of rely on being the watchdogs for it and saying like, the rest of us can go about our business because it's in good hands. There's good stewards sort of working. And that doesn't even seem to be the case anymore.
Well, I mean, we're 25 years into Everglades restoration, and, I wrote a book about it, so it's a little more complicated than this, but it's basically a water storage project, right? It's supposed to store more water in in these reservoirs so that we don't have to dump it into the estuaries or dump it into the Everglades, and so that we still have some in the dry season and for the Everglades.
Water's overrated.
And honestly, we just finished the first water storage reservoir 25 years later. I mean, it's incredible. This was supposed to be a 30-year plan. I mean, I think we're currently on track for 100 years. And it's just, it's very depressing because it used to be, at least there was this idea that, we love the Gators, we love the Panthers, we love the idea that there are no other Everglades in the world, like Marjorie Stoneman Douglas said. We love the idea that the Everglades is a test. If we pass, we get to keep the planet. Now it's like, we're failing. Who cares?
I'm more interested in a tequila storage project. Can we work on that? I'd like to work on that. Michael Grunwald, author of We Are Eating the Earth. I know what it sounds like, but it's actually really, if I can say it, fun to read and enlightening. And I'm not suggesting that you're going to quit red meat like poor Michael did, but maybe you'll eat a little bit more chicken. Eat a little bit. It's like a Chick-fil-A.
Exactly.
It's like a Chick-fil-A.
I'm like the Chick-fil-A cow.
Yeah.
Exactly. Eat more chicken. Eat more chicken. That's right.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks for having me, Billy.
Cocaine's.